Live stream. Hey, I'm super excited to introduce. So I met Marcus Chan through Ian Koniak. I'm a part of his year-long coaching group.
Live
So,
stream.
oh, let me just okay. Sorry.
It's all
Um,
good.
so yeah, you're definitely one of the most popular LinkedIn top voices, especially in sales. And I was really touched by your vulnerability and just how you started off and just your excellence and just you having a growth mindset and just how vulnerable you are in terms of getting better every day. So really excited to introduce you to maybe some of my followers know you, most of them probably do, but some probably don't. And I saw you've had a tremendous career at Cintas. One of my old director of sales started his career at Cintas, and he said that he learned so much from that. Um, and yeah, so you worked for many Fortune 100 organizations. You've won so many awards. It would take the whole 28 minutes just to go through all of your awards. But yeah, I would love to dig a little bit deeper. You shared so many different things during the conversation with Ian that I would love to double click on if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's my absolute pleasure to be here. The truth is I'm simply a guy who made a lot of mistakes, who makes even more mistakes daily still. So hopefully I can share some of my learnings along the way.
Amazing. And I think people think that, you just become viral one day, right? When like these LinkedIn influence, like, oh, like, well, I wonder, like, oh, maybe they just got lucky. And, but as you know, it took a while to get to that stage, right? What do you have to say to folks that are new in their content creation journey and, they're starting to get criticism, they're starting to get people to texting them like, hey, you should change that or you shouldn't say it at. What advice would you give to people that are newer in their content creation journey?
So that's really normal. First off, whenever you put yourself out there online on any platform doing anything, you're going to have some people, and some of the people are within your inner circle, your family, friends, maybe. And because you are now operating a little bit different than them, that can make them feel a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit weird, right? So a little backstory. Before, today at this point, a lot of people know me on LinkedIn or the platforms, but I started my journey online in about 2016, actually posting stuff, like as like a side hustle type thing. And I remember when I first started doing it, like everyone's like, that's kind of weird. Why are you doing that? Why are you posting that? My company was weird about it. They were like, what are you trying to do right now on the side?
Huh.
And it was hard to block the noise out. It really was, because you want to do well. And I think a lot of people who are in sales, they have a kind of I don't say everyone, but they have a natural like people pleasing type of personality. Like you want to make people happy and do well. So it felt weird. And that was normal, right? You start realizing that. Now, what eventually you learned is the more you do that, you start realizing who your real supporters are. Who really supports you, like who are the supporters and who are the reporters, the people who just say, why are you doing that? I can't believe Davidson's doing that. Why is Marcus doing that? That's so weird. And I'm sure that still happens to this day. But ultimately, if you know why you're doing it and you can see the long tail of the game, if you could look 3 to 5 steps ahead, look 3 to 5 years down the road, see where potentially could go, it helps you block the noise out a little more. So for me personally, I realized I wanted to make more of an impact beyond just my role at the company I was at. Like I wanted to do outside into the international, internet, if you will. So me posting online was my way of doing that. So because I was clear on why I was doing that, I was willing to deal with, the hate, etc. And the more you do it over time, you eventually start getting like, you have some people who are like supporters and stuff, and you start building a little bit of brand, but you're gonna have some people who are straight trolls. They just don't like you. They're judgmental. But I realized long ago, just kind of like cold calling, like when you cold call a gatekeeper or a prospect and they chew you out, it's never about you. It's more about them. And we start to internalize that and realize that, that person who is writing the negative comment, it's not really about you. You probably are a reflection of what they could be. And as the saying goes, like haters talk behind your back because you're in the front. So you start thinking this way and you start to perceive it differently, you'll keep going. Now, does that mean even now, years later, if someone writes something really hateful on a post or sends me like a nasty message, it doesn't bother me? Yeah,
Yeah.
it still bothers me. We're human. But I'll just kind
Yeah.
of brush it off like, okay, you know what? It's like, I actually feel bad for that person. They're just having a rough day. So I just keep on going. So as you
Huh.
progress in your journey, just be aware it's part of the journey. And the more you put yourself
Mm.
out there, the more hate you're going to get. So you want to block out the noise and focus on those who you truly can impact.
That's pretty deep. I do think you're doing something right if you're starting to get haters, right? Like that's how you know, oh, okay, I'm starting to have some people are starting to have opinions and it's causing them to think a little bit differently. So in a way, I do think that's a sign that like, okay, you're onto something.
100%. 100%. When you draw a
Huh.
line in the sand for what you believe in, it's amazing. You'll have the fans that follow and you'll have the haters on the opposing
Mm.
side. This is anybody in history, right? So I
Mm.
look at someone like an Elon Musk. He draws a line in the sand, and some people are
Sure.
like, whoa, we don't
Huh.
like that guy, what he's about, and they hate on him. And then some other people are like, go Elon. Because of that, I respect that more, right? Me personally, I know nothing's binary, but I have more respect for people who draw a line in the sand and believe in something. Even if I disagree with them, I'm like, I respect that because they have a
Huh.
level of belief and they're standing by it.
Mm. I'll come clean. It's funny, right? Because there's not a lot of Asian sales influencers out there. So I'm not gonna lie. The first few times I heard about you, I'm like, oh, see, like I'm not really vibing.
It's
But
fine.
obviously,
Yeah.
I trust Ian very much, right? Like he's like one of my mentors. Like he's really taught me a lot this last year. So when I was like, okay, because Ian says like you're his number one mentor, I'm like that says a lot about you.
Yeah.
So it is funny how, the first couple of times when people kept referring me over to you, I'm like I'm already part of Brandon Fluharty's group, already part of Jamal's group, already part of Ian's group. Like I'm good. Like I don't need any more groups. But it's just funny how we all have these like preconceived notions. And to your point, it was all on me. It was literally nothing you did, right? It was just like me in my head. And I was like, but obviously like after I heard you talk and I was like, oh my God, like everything he says like resonates so deeply with me. So I appreciate you doing that.
No, and I appreciate transparency. And it's funny because Ian asked me, during that session a couple of weeks ago, and even before, he's asked me like, why do you give so abundantly? Why, like we get on these like
Huh.
the first time we get a call, you just kind of tell me everything and how I'm a competitor of yours, and I'm like,
Huh.
the reality is like the mission's clear for me, which is the
Mm.
mission is we help salespeople become the best version of them so they can create the life of their dreams, right? And we want to do it
Yeah.
across the board. And if that means the best solution is Ian's program or someone's program, awesome. That's
Yeah.
100% awesome. At the end of the day, they'll make sales a better place so we can remove the sleaze and the
Mm.
slime in sales, and they'll help raise a game of what we do. And when you truly
Mm.
believe in the mission and the impact, you're not so much worried. You actually become indifferent to people saying, hey, I actually decided to go someone else's program. To me, it doesn't really matter.
Mm.
As long as they're doing something, that's the
Mm.
most important thing.
Wow. That's deep, man. I mean, it's clear in your energy. It's clear. You have a very clear vision, a very clear why. And I just discovered that recently, just the last couple of weeks, right? And now I'm putting myself out there a lot more because of it. Because to your point, like I'm just very clear on who I want to be intentionally, right? Whereas before I was like, oh, let me dabble, let me try things, but I was never really truly committed, at my core.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think you're not alone. First off, just so you know, like I believe there's
Yeah.
an invisible line that people live
Mm.
around. There's below the line, and that means they're unintentional, and there's above the line means they're intentional. And this is everything that they do, from how they brush their teeth to what food they
Mm.
eat, to how they treat relationships, to how they respond via text, to how they run their sales process, to how they ask questions, to how they approach learning, growth, etc. And
Mm.
most people live below the line unintentionally
Mm.
until something happens, until they have an epiphany, until something strange happens. And unfortunately, that's something that happens usually has to be something bad to
Mm.
kind of shake you from your world. That's kind of
Mm.
reality. But if you can do your best to try to be intentional in what you do, it's amazing the quality of life you can create by simply being more intentional.
Mm. And I think everyone has a different standard of excellence. Like clearly, you like you said, I love what you said about I think the lesson that resonated the most with me was when you were talking about how, yeah, you were doing well, right? Like you were, a top performer, but you weren't at like the Elon Musk level, right? And so it was just interesting how,
Still not there. Yeah.
right. But
Yeah.
you're like, I would say definitely like Elon Musk of like sales influencers at this point, right? Like you're definitely up there, right? There's like Jeb Blunt and there's certain folks that are household names
Appreciate that.
and you're definitely pretty high up there. But how do you, because I think some people they'd be happy with like that B tier, right? But it seems like for you, your vision goes beyond what most people consider like, oh, that for me, that's like the highest I'd be willing to go.
Yeah. So I think it's really there's a concept they call the self concept. This is made popular by Brian Tracy in some of his older books. And what it
Yeah.
talks about is people have a level of belief in themselves of what they can achieve and what they can do in life. And once they kind of hit that tier, they're kind of stuck. So for example, like, if you never made six figures before, and once you actually hit six figures, let's just say you have a really good 1 year and you hit six figures by June, that
Mhm.
means the rest of the year you might potentially just take it off and kind of
Mm.
slow down because you hit your self concept.
Mm.
So it's really important, I think, to constantly increase your self concept.
Huh.
And the way you do that is, number one, you have to put yourself in an environment where you're constantly getting challenged and constantly growing. So that means
Yeah.
like putting yourself in really difficult situations. So I'll give you a really simple two different examples. So I remember at one point in my career, I was, I think, yeah, 26 years old. I was making six figures. Life was good. I ran a small team, and I was going to be next in line for promotion. And I'm doing well. I have a good life. Bought my first house. Finished my MBA. Did all before 20. Got married as well. Did all before 26. I'm like, okay, I feel pretty good. I'm
Mm.
doing the American dream. I'm doing the American dream.
Mhm.
I feel pretty good. But there was a little voice in the back of my head, which was like, what else can I learn from the environment I'm in, and the people I'm in, and the
Mm.
places I work with? Like, who's the best of the best? And yeah, I can still keep kind of
Mm.
going up levels, but I'm like, but am I the biggest fish in my pond right now? And I kind of felt
Yeah.
that way, right?
Huh.
Not from an egotistical perspective. I just felt like I wasn't learning and growing anymore.
Mm.
So I had to make that educated guess or bet on myself to make a move to a whole new industry, because I'll also, I'm like, maybe I got lucky. Maybe I got lucky through the last recession and just somehow stumbled to winning every year. I mean, I got lucky, I don't know, maybe it's a combination of the territory, my circumstances. So I challenged myself. It went to a whole new and took a two-step demotion, right?
Mm.
To challenge myself and do that. Fortunately, had a lot of success, did really well. Got to the point where I was running a sales org of 110 plus employees. I
Mm.
was traveling all the time and had massive number to deliver on, a lot of employees, big staff, etc. And life was good as well at the time. I'm
Mm.
like, okay, like I can keep doing this, but how can I challenge myself some more? Because I mean, it'll still be challenging regardless. Like, yeah, like
Yeah.
when you have a nine-figure quota that goes up every year, it's really hard to hit regardless.
All right.
So I'm like, okay, like what will be my next challenge? Right? How can I become a little better? Right. And I was really betting myself, a really scary bet. What Ian did, right? It's
Mm.
like, let me go all in on myself. And like, can I do it for
Mm.
myself?
Yeah.
Can I build my own products and services? Can I scale? Can I actually be a business owner? Can I be an
Mm.
entrepreneur? And that was on the next season, right?
Mm.
So I think and what happens is you start challenging yourself and you start surrounding yourself with other people. Because now at that point,
Mm.
like even like now, my closest friends now are entrepreneurs, people like Ian, other people who are building businesses, online businesses and doing crazy things too. Like
Yeah.
now it's a different game.
Mm.
So that's why it's so key to constantly be around the people, not necessarily to compare, but
Mm.
to show you what's possible,
Huh.
right? Show you what's possible. So, for example, I remember being 21 years old and thinking it's still a decent amount of money. $100,000 is a lot of money, right? I'm like, oh, it's a lot of money, right? But then I met a kid who's 21, 22 years old making $250,000. I'm like, oh,
Mm.
wow, it's possible, right?
Yeah.
You start getting to the point then you meet reps who can make $1 million a year. You're like, oh my
Mm.
gosh, it's possible, right? Then you meet
Yeah.
people who are making $2 million a month,
Yeah.
5 million a month. And you're like, oh my, like, okay, there are levels to this game that I don't even know about, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's how you start raising the bar for yourself and raising that
Mm.
self-concept.
So I love what you said, right? How do you, because they say comparison is the thief of joy. So how do you, it sounds like you honestly genuinely root for everyone, right? Like it doesn't, with you, it doesn't feel like it's a quote unquote competition, but more of like hey, we're all like lifting each other up. Like if you win, I win, right? It really does feel that way.
Well, and I think it depends on your belief system, right? Now, it doesn't mean if I see someone have lots of success, it doesn't mean I don't get envious or jealous. I think
Hmm.
instinctually as a human being, I'm like, dang, I wish I had that. I wish I had those results. I wish I had this. I wish I had that. I think it's human, that's human nature, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it's then how do you channel that energy?
Mm.
How do you convert that energy into something productive? So it's like, oh wow, this person did this. Actually, let's find out what they did. Let's learn from them. And how can I take what they've done and accelerate
Mm.
my own learning curve? So what's
Mm.
really important are the internal dialogue, the internal questions you ask yourself.
Mm.
So I think instinctually, and it's taking time to train myself this way. Instinctually, it's something you see someone do something great, whether it's on an Instagram highlight reel or on LinkedIn, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh God, like them, they're a bozo. I can't believe they achieved that, right? That's kind of maybe I'm better than them. That's kind of your instinct, right?
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because and
Yeah.
then what happens? Your brain starts asking questions like, why are they able to? How are they so lucky? Why do
Mm.
they have all the good luck? Why is this happening for them?
Mm.
But then when you get the key is you pause yourself
Mm.
and you ask different questions, which is, huh, what are they doing that I'm not doing?
Mm.
What belief patterns do they have that I don't have? What strategies are they implementing that I'm not doing? What
Mm.
can I do to mirror their results? What can I do to mirror their process?
Mm.
So now what happens is you go from that negative focus and energy to a growth mindset of
Mm.
learning. And when you start learning how to control yourself that way, you start having better answers, right?
Mm.
So Tony Robbins says, if you don't like the answer, ask a better question. And this goes from what they're doing externally, but more importantly, is actually internally what questions you have.
Mm.
And your brain's so smart. It's so smart. If you ask it bad questions, it'll tell you, like,
Mm.
why are they better than you? Well, they're better than you because of this, and this, right? Oh, but the economy is so bad. Like, how are they getting so lucky? Well, they're lucky because they
Mm.
have better territory, you
Mm.
know, and that becomes very negative, and that doesn't serve you. So if you understand that, if you can pause those questions and be intentional with it, you can
Mm.
help start to train your brain over time to flip it around. And even if you slip, which will happen, you're hopefully able to pause yourself, like, all right, let me just reframe.
Mm.
What can I learn from this? What can I gain from this? What lessons can I pull from this? The mistake a lot of people make is when they see something like that, or if they make a mistake, is they learn the wrong lesson.
Uh,
When you learn the wrong
huh.
lesson, it doesn't serve you.
Wow. I mean, it's clear that you've done a lot of work, right? You've probably read more books than 99.99% of
Books.
human beings, listened to a lot, attended a lot of conferences. I mean, there's no shortcut, right? There's clearly layers to it and levels to it. Um, and so what is your recommendation for, for instance, like, a good chunk of my career, like I'm Asian and usually my teammates are usually like tall white dudes that
Oh yeah.
have played college, almost
Oh
get
yeah.
drafted by the Phillies and things like that, right? How do we go from, like actually, like what's your thought process in first, like, okay, that's interesting, and then have an empowering thought where you're not really like paralyzed by it all.
I think early on I was paralyzed by it. To be quite frank, it's like, that feeling when you walk into even a training class, you walk into a training class, you look different, right?
Yeah.
Like physically look different, like you look different, you might act different. Some people have an accent, so they sound different. And there's like this level of insecurity where it's like, I remember like walking those rooms, and I remember like the first room I walked into for my first training class, it's like, a lot of white kids, right? Good
Yeah.
looking white kids look like walking out of an Abercrombie magazine, right? Picture perfect. And here I am, like, this Asian kid walking in, and there's feelings of insecurity. And it's like, do I belong here? Should I be here? And that
Mm.
I mean, that was a feeling I don't know about you, but I felt that way growing up, and for class, even going to school, just
Mm.
like walking, I'm like, cool, I'm gonna go sit
Mm.
with the black kid in the back because we're the outsiders. That's how it became,
Right.
right? You just felt like
Right.
you always felt different, you
Hmm.
know. And that was part of growth. I grew up in a very white town, so that definitely happened a lot early on. Now, as I started to the first thing I started to do early on was, I'm like, even though I felt that way, I'm like, one thing I could always control was my work ethic. I just knew that. I'm like, I can always control my work ethic regardless. So
Yeah.
whatever was being trained or taught, whatever, I would be fastidious in consuming, learning, and executing to my best of my ability. Whatever
Mm.
my boss told me to do, I'll do more.
Mm.
Right. Intentionally, because I want to earn a seat at the table, for lack of a better term. Right. To be able to say, hey, listen, I'm worthy, that
Mm.
I belong here. I'm just as good as you. I may not
Mm.
have your height. I may not have your good looks. I may not have your charm. I may not be able to speak as well as you, but I'm going to
Huh.
earn that spot on the table. Now, the first
Mhm.
thing, right? And
Huh.
that's how I started building. Now, as I started to evolve over time, I would observe certain characteristics that they had that I did not have,
Hmm.
and I would focus on improving that. So, for example, um, how I speak now is not how I used to speak. So I used to, I mean, I grew up with a speech impediment, and I'm better now. I can speak a little better now, but back then, especially out of college, I could speak well like casual friends, but I couldn't I didn't have executive presence. I
Hmm.
couldn't carry a room. I didn't have the confidence swagger to to move people and get them to move together.
Hmm.
So I was timid. I was like, "Hi, I'm Marcus. Nice to meet you. I'm from Portland, Oregon." That's how like my intros were. So, but I would observe. I'm like, "Wow, that person is really good at
Hmm.
like cares of and succinctly
Mm.
delivering the message they want." So when I observe that characteristic, I'm like, I'm going to teach myself how to do that.
Huh.
So I would practice to get that down. Like, even for example, let's just say it's a simple intro to just like, hi, my name is Marcus. This is my background. This is what I'm about. I would
Yeah.
practice that early on. I'm like, they're probably going to ask. I'm going to practice this. So when I'm
Mm.
there, I can sound good, sound confident. I observe their body language. I observe how they carry themselves. I observe
Mm.
how they wrote, how they spoke. So I took all these things. I started to improve these things over time. Right. And then I started I would actually observe for weaknesses. Whatever people were weak in, I'm like, I'm going to make up for and outdo them.
Huh.
So when you start kind of, when you see it as a game, I saw it as a game basically. When it's a game, I'm like, okay, I'm going to mirror the best qualities, observe the weakest, and stand
Mhm.
out in the ways that no one else can stand out. So
Hmm.
when you start doing that, what ends up happening is you start really differentiating yourself, right? Here's another really good example. I observed, this is in high school, I observed most Asian males, generally speaking, very thin, very scrawny, right?
Mm.
Like that's why in movies, we are commonly portrayed as like a nerdy, weak Asian kid. I didn't like
Right.
that.
Right.
So what did I do? I worked out fastidiously, right? So I could build a better body, build a better stature, have more confidence to be able to show up properly, right? To
Hmm.
break free of that mold that we get held to. It's like,
Mm.
no, we don't all have to be good at math and science. Like if we have any good at math, that's a side benefit, but we have many other skills as well. So I
Hmm.
wanted to develop those things too, right? So that's why it's like I observe those as opportunities, right? What people see as weaknesses, I'm like, how can I make that a strength? So
Hmm.
kind of a long answer, but hopefully that answered your question.
No, I mean, it, I think sometimes when we're born with certain gifts, right? Like we'll use Ian, for example, right? Like he's clearly a gifted and very passionate person, right? So like he has an X factor that just
Yeah.
screams like the moment you meet him in a room, everyone just gravitates towards him, right?
Yep.
I would say, we're less like that. So, but
Mm-hmm.
because you are so well rounded, right? It's interesting because all these little nuances that you've perfected or you've practiced so much that the overall package it's a very complete package, right? So
It
that's
just
what I.
takes time. Well, so I think so. The biggest thing is it starts with number one, which is self awareness. It's just
Yeah.
like being aware, like what are my shortcomings, how people perceive me, and listen to trusted advisors. So, for example, I had a sales VP who said, Marcus, I was a new sales leader. He said, Marcus, like, listen, you're like you actually have a lot of really good insight, but I feel like when we're in these group settings, you actually don't contribute very much.
Hmm.
You're not raising your hand. You're not sharing your idea. Like you're doing so much more than like I know because I'm your
Mm.
VP, but
Hmm.
you're like being too quiet and being too timid.
Mm.
Why aren't you sharing? I'm like, why? I feel like it's kind of like obvious what I'm doing. Like they should just, I
Hmm.
think they're already doing it. I don't think it's gonna be useful. I don't think it's gonna be helpful. He's like, no, 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 no. He's like, you need to establish yourself as the go-to person. So you have to share these ideas and contribute, but also it's like it's part of the game, man. It's part of the freaking game. Like they're gonna perceive the loudest guy who's talking right now is not that good. Like so,
Sure.
don't let that sway people. You
Huh.
show up. You don't have to be loud necessarily, but you can do it in your own way.
Mm.
So that was really good feedback from him. So I took that. I'm like, wow, that's a good point. I wasn't aware of that. So what I thought was being a good, respectful thing to sit back, let people kind of just do their thing. I'm like, actually, it was hurting me. So I took that
Mm.
as feedback. So I started to contribute more, like, proactively as well. So that's why it's key to increase your self-awareness. So you can see like, how you've been perceiving. Perception is reality. So if you understand to be true, how can you curve the perception to your benefit?
Man, I mean, I feel like we can talk for hours. But Marcus, I really just want to acknowledge you for, well, the self-awareness that you have and really just your clear vision on how you're serving the universe and your communities. I have no doubt that you'll continue to impact many, many lives, millions of lives in your lifetime. And I'm here to support you. And I look forward to many more conversations with you.
Thanks. It's my absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.